Hello and welcome to the new year, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. I would like to thank you so much for being a part of our success story in 2023.
Well, starting off the new year by taking a few steps back into the past with a review of some of the top issues of discourse in the year just past. On my part, I will bring you excerpts from key conversations with notable persons whose insights on the issues raised I found rather profound. Elizabeth?
Well, same goes for me as well, since I intend to bring up a couple of conversations of key national and global issues. We will review issues on gender, climate change, and many more.
Very well then, let's kickstart this episode. I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
It's not cash transfer. It's not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate calculation.
Many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
And applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori.
Whilst constitutionally the security and welfare of the people is the primary responsibility of government, however, when put within the context of nation building, we raised key issues involving leadership, citizenship, and nationhood. We queried the rationale for a nation of citizens vis-a-vis the responsibilities of states and citizens in nation building. My guest was Eko Ejembi Eko, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Let's create a basis for our discussion on this issue by dissecting citizenship and obligations. I know it is guaranteed by the Constitution that one can only be a citizen of Nigeria by faith, by marriage, or naturalization. So that is not the issue. The issue, and that is my question to you, is whether by virtue of the provisions of sections 24B and C, which of course talks about citizens' obligations, the citizens or citizenry, do they have a greater responsibility than the leadership in the task of nation building? Is it, in your opinion, who has what and who has more?
Well, in my humble view, if you speak to the obligations of citizens, pari passu the duty of the leadership in building a nation, it's a give and take thing. You don't expect the leaders to take the sole responsibility of developing a nation. The citizens have to play their own part. There are obligations that are meant for citizens to perform, while other obligations are that of the state. Yes, it is considered security, welfare, that of the state. The little duties and obligations that behoves on the citizens, how have we performed it? Have we been paying our tax obligations? Have we been meeting each and every liability that a citizen of a nation has to do in order to show patriotism? People throw about the word patriotism as if it's just a title, but I think it's something that is more encompassing. As a citizen of a state, indeed, just like as you are a member of a household, how have you done your own bit to better the household that you come from? Nigeria, generally, we are more quick to criticize than to assist in the building of the nation. I hold that as a very minority view, so to say. But I think the ball must start from us. It must start from us.
Indeed, because what we're often prone to, or what we often see, is people saying, there's this mentality of we against them. The people on the one side, and then government on the one side, on the other hand. And then the people pushing all of the balls towards the leader or the leadership, political leadership that is, not mindful that they have even a greater responsibility, and that's, in my opinion, to the task of nation building.
Yeah, I think we cannot shy away from our own basic responsibilities. A leader can only lead very well if the followers are ready to also follow very well. It's as simple as that. A leader is a representation of those that he leads. We as a people, how have we performed our own duties? Go round, even go to how we live. How have we been a good neighbor? Security is local. Have we looked out for the welfare of our neighbors? Are we bothered if all is going well with our neighbor or not? We cast so much aspersion as to the lack of leadership, so to speak, forgetting that these leaders are picked from us.
Exactly.
We vote them into power. They are a representation of who we are. So
there's
if we
also
say
a
that the
saying that
leadership is bad, then
Yes.
we also have to do some sober reflection as to how are we as a people.
it's quite a popular saying, as in when they say that people deserve the kind of leadership that they get, because of course the leadership emerges from the people themselves. SAN.
Yes, well, I agree. I think there is an old quotation that says, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. In Nigeria, it works in the reverse. Everybody sits and expects the leadership to perform miracles. You as a citizen, have you done your bit?
You know?
If you go to even cleanliness around our households, how many times have we come out before, if we are not mandated to come and clean our environments? There's incessant frauds because they're draining and the drainages are blocked. Who blocks them? Is it the leadership? We speak of insecurity.
Yes.
Who are these bandits? Who are these thieves? Who are these dishonest people? They are members of the society like me and you. So I think a lot needs to be done to reorient ourselves as to our duties as citizens and to be a little bit more patriotic.
You know, when we talk about this whole issue of nation building, government and citizens and role and all that, isn't it easy to assume, or maybe I should say, would it be a fallacy to ask citizens to just trust government, especially in the evolution and perhaps development and implementation of policies and public programs? Or would it be more rational to say that government has to keep working to gain public trust, because of course it has to be earned in the first place?
Yes, to that extent I concede. Trust must be earned. But the duty of leadership, pari passu governance, it's an interactive thing. The people must do their bit, while the leaders must also do their bit. You talk of policy implementation. How do you implement this policy? Look at traffic violations. How many Nigerians without penalties or without a force being attributed for failure thereof will obey simple traffic instructions? We see this every day. We as a people need to sit down and ask ourselves the kind of country that we want. And I think it should start from the most basic units, the households, the churches, the mosques, our social clubs. I think our value system has dropped. Yes, the leaders must earn our trust, but we should also assist them in making leadership slightly easier. It's a Herculean task. I don't envy any leader in present-day Nigeria. I do not.
You know, in my opening, I referenced a couple of nations. Maybe I didn't mention them, but of course they are out there. Nations referenced as nations of citizens, and that is because there's this. It's not physical. It's not. I mean, it's a sense of nationalism, not native nationalism like we do have here, and that's an issue that I want to talk about here. You know, and I don't want to get started on politics and the dangers constantly posed by the divisive rhetorics of politicians. Well, and all of that, but you and I would agree, we saw what played out during the last elections season, during the campaigns and you know, and all of that during the elections. Many analysts continue to say that ethnic, sometimes religious induced pattern of campaigning and even voting is at the center of Nigeria's political immaturity, or the political immaturity in Nigeria, and that it further exacerbates division in the country. I'll ask you again, are we going to drop this solely on the feet or foot of political leaders, ignoring the fact that those used to often push these narratives, negative narratives, are citizens like you and I, and that the citizenry bear a huge bulk of responsibility for the division that we experience and the tension as well in the land?
Well, the The socio-cultural realities of Nigeria cannot be wished away. The average Nigerian first thinks of himself as a tribal man, as somebody from a particular village, from a particular local government.
Is that perhaps why they refer to us in some quarters as a nation of tribesmen?
I think I want to agree. Not completely, but to a large extent. If you ask the typical Nigerian man on the streets, where are you from? He's not from Nigeria. He's first an Igbo man from his clan, from his local government, before he comes from his state, before they start thinking of Nigeria as a whole.
That goes for other Nigerians from other tribes.
Go to the north, it's the same thing. Ask the man from Zamfara, he will tell you that. Ask the guy from Niger Delta, it's the same thing. Ask the man from Oyo.
So that is a massive problem.
And the social...
And it's at the center of what we're discussing here.
Like I said, it's an orientation thing. We need to change our mindset. We need to first sit down and agree that a good person is a good person regardless of the language he speaks, of the tribe that he comes from, or of where he had the misfortune of being born. We do not pick where we are born. But in Nigeria, we are limited to that. If I was born in Lagos, I'm sure I'll be a Yoruba man. If I was born in Kaduna, I'll be a Kaduna man. But regardless of the accidents of our birth, we need to first think about the nation in the front row of our prioritization, not to first think of ourselves from that place you come from. If you go to the local governments, if they speak more than one languages, there's that division. If you go to the villages, if there are two dialects, there's the same division. It's a socio-cultural reality. So
it's not just limited to politics alone.
No, the politics keys into your interest. The views you hold as a person determines the kind of politics you play. You can't divorce one from the other. Cannot. We can wish it away, we can pray it away, we can hope it goes away, we can speak it away as we try to do. We come here, give beautiful speeches, we'll do symposiums and workshops, and we assume that the man in the marketplace in Boku or the man in the marketplace in Otukpo understands us. It's not true. Reorientation must start from the grassroots.
You talk about reorientation. I mean, we've had I don't know, we've had agencies of government, as in or public agencies in charge of that for some time, for decades now. But like you did say, this is something that has to start from the smallest social unit, which is the family, like you've identified. But then let me take you back again to this, your inference to the fact that we lack, or rather there is an absence of a rallying identity and a national cause in Nigeria. Usually, you know, when the matter of patriotism is on the table, that is even when it is more apparent. Do you think there is one single or maybe a couple of elements that can become a national rallying point or identity? Maybe can it be shared language? I mean, what can possibly be that one key ingredient that makes unity, that makes citizen participation, and makes collective ownership of Nigeria a common denominator?
The only times that Nigerians are united.
Don't tell me it's during football match.
During football, where Yakuba Egbeni scores, they forget that he's a Yoruba man.
that cannot be the only rallying.
Nobody wants to ask where he comes from.
That cannot be the only rallying point.
That's the only time that we are completely Nigerians first.
Another prominent issue that formed part of national and global concerns last year was the climate change adaptation processes. Nigeria was part of countries who led conversations on how to adopt processes for cleaner energy and greener economy at the COP28 in Dubai. Now, guest Sam Onibo was one of the participants at the 2023 Climate Change Summit. So let's begin with an assessment of the journey on climate matters. How far have we gone?
Thank you. I think it is fair to say that we have made progress in that, for instance, you pointed out that we have a Climate Change Act now for Nigeria, which was passed in 2021 after about being in the House or in the National Assembly for around 16 years. because from what I heard from the directors in the Department of Climate Change of Ministry of Environment, they said they started conversations on this issue of climate change about the 5th Assembly. But the first bill was moved in the 6th Assembly, and then another bill was moved in the 7th Assembly. Each one failed. And then before I first sponsored it in the 8th Assembly, it also failed. And finally, I sponsored it, and we were able to get it passed, talking about the 9th Assembly. So in terms of what we've been able to do, through the provisions of that act, the federal government of Nigeria has established the National Council on Climate Change, which is now the main body that is coordinating issues concerning climate change around the nation. But what is significant about the body is that it is chaired, the National Council is chaired by Mr. President, and in his absence, the Vice President. But it has ministers from different ministries, so many of them, so that at the end of the day, we'll be able to check what we are coming back with as a nation. But it's important also to mention, talking about achievements, that the 36th Ordinary Session of Africa Union resolved that we are going to have Africa Climate Summit, which held in Nairobi,
yes,
where AU adopted certain positions to make sure that Africa speaks with one voice. So in terms of progress, we have made some progress, regarding the issues of climate change.
All right, let me quickly take you on our focus at COP20 this time around, and then I'm going to be taking you back to COP27, where securing funds to implement energy transition plan was launched, and raising additional finance based on the $100 billion pledge made by the Global North in 2009 to support mitigation and adaptation in developing countries. How do we achieve this now that we are heading to COP28?
Well, thank you very much for that very important question. Everything about COP, again, we don't want to go into the history of the evolution of climate change. Everything about COP has been gradual, it's been progressing, and that's why I said we have made some modest achievements. You recall that in 2015, during COP21, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change was adopted. The former president was there. I was lucky to be there also. And eventually, nations started signing up. From April of 2016, we signed our own on the 22nd of September 2016 at the UN headquarters. That's when the former president signed. I was also lucky to be there. So what we are saying now is that everything about it has been gradual. You refer to the $100 billion that was $100 billion that was promised by the Global North to help us address some of the effects of climate change, and whether we've made any progress. Well, I think part of the money that has come in trickles. We have not received money that is commensurate with the impact that we are getting from the global emitters. And the money has not also come in block to help us address all these developing nations, the adverse, impact of climate change on them. I understand that the developed world, led by the US, they're still insisting that we have this money domiciled within the World Bank for the time being as an interim measure, because the developing world is asking that, especially, organ be set up so that we don't face the hard conditions that institutions like World Bank, IMF put up when you want to access funds. So I think there is progress. As we go down, I'm sure that we'll make further progress.
Now, let's talk about the vulnerability of some African countries. How do we operationalize the loss and damage fund to support countries that are actually vulnerable to climate change? Because some have not even started at all.
Yeah, it's important. I'm happy that the conversations around climate change, Africa emits less than 4%. Yet, the impacts of climate change, the negative effects of climate change, are felt more here because we are not prepared. We haven't prepared to be able to really, absorb the shocks coming, either from desertification or flood or the kind of problems that we have around Mozambique, Malawi, and the rest of the parts of Africa. The reason is because we have not prepared. But again, this is the reason why we're talking about one voice. When at the Africa Climate Summit, the heads of states and governments of Africa and other international organizations, including regional bodies like ECOWAS, met, they decided that we must take a position. And that position is that we are going to transit, but that we need resources to help Africa to absorb these shocks. Because, like you said, and I concur with you, we are more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change than the developed world, because they have known all these things and they've been preparing for them over the years. Imagine the instance I cited, how long it took the National Assembly to be able to pass a climate change act. It was not the fault of the National Assembly. A lot of it was coming from the executive, because a lot of those bills, after being passed by the National Assembly, were shut down. So awareness is important. And that's why in making the act on climate change, we made it to cut across the board from the national level to the state level to the local government level.
We also attempted to gain insight into some of the issues that plagued the Nigerian judiciary in 2023, arising from public perception, some of which suggested that the judiciary is saddled with concerns such as nepotism and corruption. While we know that the judiciary, of course, is all about fairness, equity, and justice, we did analyze if that is now in doubt and talked about causative factors precipitating some of these concerns, or public concerns, I should say. My guest was Ms. Nasra Kugo Umar, barrister and public affairs commentator. It does appear like some of the recent events concerning the judiciary may be a reminder of certain things that have happened in the past. And I'm sure you remember the dust raised by the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, in its report some time ago, which indicated that the judiciary is on top of the Nigerian corruption index between 2018 and 2020. We see issues arising from post-election cases being determined by the judiciary, and then complaints from aggrieved parties, and then we see certain slips, whether clerical or not, on the part of the judiciary. Is there a basis for some of these allegations that you think, and should Nigerians be worried that the ICPC may have indeed opened the hornet's nest years ago, and that the situation was probably not taken as seriously as it should have been?
You are right, because what happened is monumental portrayal of disrespect to the sanctity of the judiciary. The judiciary is supposed to be the arbiter of any dispute within the country, and justice should not only be seen to be done, but should manifestly be seen to be done in any matter that comes before the judicature. Under section 14 subsection 1, democracy, in other words, the people are the custodians of the sanctity of sovereignty in Nigeria. Therefore, whatever you do and you gauge it with the perception of the people, the preponderance majority of which are not satisfied with the quality of the judgment that are coming from our judiciary, then it leaves a lot to be desired about. And apart from that, when you look at the Constitution very clearly under section 36, talking about the equality before the law, you go there in order to get justice. But in a situation whereby justice is shredded away on the altar of some considerable technicalities, in Nigeria now it has virtually become a tradition whereby the solidity of the law is normally taken in abeyance in preference of some technical things that should be done as the basis upon which judgments are given. This thing that happens is really unacceptable, going by the sanctity of the legal profession that claims to be the only institution of the learned men and women. And at the same time, where it is expected that judiciary, or rather justice, should be the last thing a common man should expect. And then when you see these type of things and you see errors that are uncondonable. For something to happen of that magnitude, definitely it is uncondonable. Then you need to go back and find out the quality of the type of people that are adjudicating over our matters.
Quality.
That is one. Then number two, apart from the quality, you talk about the system itself. The system itself that allows technicality, superiority over solidity of the law. And at the same time, you look at even the method of the recruitment of those judges that are supposed to be there, vis-a-vis what is the constitutional provision regarding what factors should be considered. In those days when somebody is to be appointed as a judge, the processes will be kept surreptitiously, different from him, not allowing him to know about it at all. People will go there, the security agencies will be allowed to really investigate his background, apart from his background, his etiquette, apart from etiquette, his degree of knowledge of the law, apart from the knowledge of the law, the experience, the maturity of mind, the level of his dexterity when it comes to the matters of discipline, matters of patriotism, matters of nationalism, matters of anti-corruption stand regarding the sanctity of the purity of the mind of the judge. All these factors are normally coming into play, but over the years there are a lot of accusations regarding, say, whosoever wants to become a judge should first of all prepare himself to be anointed by somebody who is a serving judge. You cannot be a judge in your own cause. You cannot be the one to determine who will be your own successors. But in Nigeria, that appears to be the decision. You will see children of the judicial officers are the ones that are making up the list. They are brothers, they are cronies. Those that they have one affinity or the other affinity with the judicial officers are the ones that are making the list. Any society that decided to jettison competence, quality, credibility, integrity, and morality, then definitely it is a doom that we are expecting.
I mean, you've thrown up quite a bit here, and these are issues I would like to take you up on. I mean, these issues are key. You've talked about quality. You've talked about the system. And yet again, you threw up the issue of, it all begins perhaps from the recruitment process.
Yes.
We'll talk about all of this, I tell you, down the line. But in talking about some of the issues that we've experienced of late within the judicial craft in Nigeria, and then we've talked about the clerical errors and all of that, there is again another issue that I consider quite germane, and I realize that upholding the rule of law and respecting the sanctity of ongoing court cases is vital to maintain public trust in the judiciary. So a situation where we have even lawyers taking out full advertorials on newspapers to make opinions on ongoing legal matters before a judge, isn't that considered a clear breach of sub judice principles? What are the repercussions for such undue interference?
Well, it's not an interference as such, because when you look at it carefully, even if matters are taken before the National Judicial Council, which is the apex body charged with the responsibility of measuring the degree of moral rectitude and other things on the execution of the judicial officers while on the bench. When you look at it, it leaves a lot to be desired. How many of them have ever been penalized? How many of them have ever been sanctioned on account of doing one wrong thing or the other over the period of years? So if you look at it, then you will not be surprised, because the failure of the NJC and indeed the judicature as a whole to be sanitizing the members and at the same time inflicting penalties on them. These are the things that have really brought it about for it to be like it's a tradition. Whatever you do, you get away with it. Look at, for example, this very serious, unprecedented type of professional breach, and then you call it typographical error. Which typographical error will do that? And in so many places there, the submissions are there, and then you call it typographical error. If it's just a mistake of an alphabet or a mistake under a word or just one or two, you can call them typographical errors, but not something that has to do with fundamental statements, fundamental stipulations regarding positions, regarding matters that have to do with even payment of penalties, regarding absolvance of offenses against whosoever is being accused. So all these things are decent. The important thing is that this is a torchlight that has really, lightened the directional compass of our judicial process. It is left for members of the judiciary to really think about how they can sanitize their own good image, and then how can they come back, roll the good image of those days. Remember the immediate past Supreme Court judge that left the decision, what he said. Remember too what happened last year when judges of the Supreme Court gang up against the Chief Justice of the Federation on accusations of, very serious corrupt accusations. But at the end, that thing was swept into the carpet because you have not had anything.
Can I read you something from May 2022? And this was something Justice H.M.B. Echo, the retired Justice of the Supreme Court, said, when he was referencing the corruption and indiscipline, which he says pervades Nigerian judiciary. And this was in reference to, and I'm bringing this up because of what you said about the National Judicial Council.
Yes.
And this is what he said, and I would like to quote him here. He said, with all deference to the NJC, the punishment falls short of the expectation of the public that these bad eggs should have been broken or smashed or exterminated to serve as deterrent. He said, and this is quoting him as well, when the punishment for an outstanding bad and outrageous conduct is far too lenient, it encourages impunity and or repeat by others of arrant and atrocious misconduct, he ended with saying. Is it to say that there is double standards on the part of NJC in handling some of these issues, or NJC is more like it's like a bulldog without teeth or a bulldog without bites? Yeah.
Now, NJC really, it has failed the expectations of the citizenry when it comes to the matters of sanitization of the judicature generally. NJC has failed, and I do not see the entire gamut of the legal profession needs very serious revolutionary sanitization. Sections 230 to 304 of the Constitution should clinically be x-rayed so that certain things should be infused there, certain things should be removed there. For example, all these political cases, it is an anathema for you to be exposing our sacred judges into all these cases. All these political cases establish election offenses court, establish it as a court of independence, as a court of summary trial where you will go within a period of 4 weeks, maximum 6 weeks, you give judgment, as a court whereby you bar the possibility of having any appeal they are going into regular courts. Let the regular court be discharging their own decision. All these things that have to do with the governmental something, bureaucracy, all these things that have to do with matters of corruption, establish an anti-corruption court, let it be the one to be dealing with that.
Well, the mandate of the Ministry of Women Affairs is to advise the government on gender, disability and geriatric concerns, among other priorities. The ministry also initiates policy guidelines to ensure gender equity and mainstream policies at both the national and international levels. With our new leadership in the Ministry of Women Affairs in 2023, we took out time to have a conversation with the new boss at the helm of affairs at the ministry. Let's take a listen. Now, a new administration is on board. What will be different for the Nigerian woman under your watch? So many things. We're overhauling the place. It's a new narrative altogether. From now onwards, the women will be more protected. The women will be more cared for. They will now realize that they're Nigerians. And this is a land full of milk and honey. They have no reason to be suffering. Now we've opened our eyes. Let me assume and look at it that the country has failed them before. But now with the new president and the renewed hope of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, they are going to see a very huge change. So number one, anybody that tampers with a woman or any violence on any woman or even neglect on any woman, we will leave no stone unturned to bring that person to book legally. That is number one. Number two, we will not tolerate the handouts anymore, where they've been using the name of our Nigerian women to bring in a lot of money from outside the country by foreign donors.
They bring in these monies in the name of assisting Nigerian women and children, while we end up finishing this money on advocacy, meetings, and training, or lecturing them, or advising them. That's not what we need. You can't continue advising a hungry person. You keep talking, and a hungry person is dying of hunger. We don't want it anymore. I was with ambassador for Canada yesterday, and he said to me that they put in $150 million every year in Nigeria. I was like, on what? Where? Where is the impact? And what exactly? He said that they do empowerment of women. I said, okay, what kind of empowerment is that? He said, like going to talk to their husband while they shall allow the women to work. Work on what? You didn't provide the work, you didn't empower them, and you're talking about talking to their husband. And they equally talk to them on how they can be saving money. How can they save money when you have not given them what to do? And I told them this is not what they want anymore. You can't be using our country's name to collect monies from donors. And it's not making any impact. You're not using it to help these people. Then you people spend it amongst yourselves, and they feel Nigerians that they will corner to think they are getting money while your country is being so changed. So I told him I will not partner with you if the right things are not done. And those right things must be you partner with us to empower these women on something that is sustainable.
You were able to carve a niche for yourself in the Nigerian political space. And I would like to ask you this final question. How do we improve on the data? How do we increase the data of women in politics in Nigeria? How do we increase the number?
My sister, we have only 10% of women that own property in Nigeria. 10% of population. 10%. So where are those women going to come from? So it still boils down to that empowerment. Build their voices, empower them, encourage them, and they'll start coming out of, they'll start having a self-esteem and self-confidence to be able to join politics. If we build our women, and many of them will be courageous enough to start coming out, and being courageous is money in your pocket, solving your problems, reducing poverty on them, and they will have the courage to come out. And then if you now empower such women to join politics, the woman will have a voice and have confidence to join that politics, knowing that if she goes home, she already had food before coming out to feed her family and to eat.
Closely linked to our last conversation is the one I had with Ambassador Samuela Isopi, the EU ambassador to Nigeria and ECOWAS. It was in the thick of the global advocacy against gender-based violence. My conversation with the EU ambassador addressed parliamentary response to ending the scourge in Nigeria. Violence against women and girls is still a global phenomenon. Why is this still persisting?
Well, yes, definitely. It is a global phenomenon in Nigeria, in Africa, but also across Europe, which really shows that we need to join forces and see how we can put an end to this global scourge. And you know, to really fight effectively against gender-based violence, we are convinced that what is needed is really what we call comprehensive, transformative approach, where everybody has to come together, do its part, and see how we can put an end to this scourge. So what we need is really to have a collective response addressing all the elements, all the dimensions of this phenomenon, and also gather together all the forces, you know, institutions, civil society, partners. And in Nigeria, this is something that we have seen happening over the past few years, thanks to a strong, I would say, alliance between the institutions at the federal level, at the state level, the civil society organizations, women movements, but also religious leaders and, of course, partners.
All right, you know, data actually showed 28,000 reported cases since, I think, 2020. What would be your assessment of this menace in Africa?
No, first of all, gender-based violence remains largely underreported because of the stigma that still surrounds it. So even the numbers that we have do not really reflect the reality of this phenomenon, because we really think that the numbers are much higher. And so the first step, the first thing to do is really to see how to help survivors to speak out, to speak up, and to report what they have been going through. Data are extremely important to understand what is the scale of the phenomenon and to see together what are the best responses we can give.
All right, would you say Africa is responding positively to ending this menace?
I mean, as you know, the European Union is very much involved, engaged, and has been working very closely with the government, with partners, with the civil society organization to help organize an effective response to gender-based violence. And what we have seen is a positive dynamic that has been launched and that we hope will continue to be sustained. And as I said, what we have seen is, step by step, all the actors coming together and building up, the elements of an effective response. The first step, I would say, is on the legislative framework. We have seen in Nigeria that all the states have now domesticated the BAP Act and the Child Rights Act, which is a very important step. We have seen also the number of sexual assault referral centers that are the one-stop centers that are supposed to provide services to survivors of gender-based violence. We have seen this number significantly increase since 2017 from 10 centers to the 41 centers that we have today in Nigeria in 21 states across the country. We have seen also an initial movement towards response also in the judicial sector, which is extremely important because ending impunity for perpetrators of gender-based violence should be a fundamental part of this response. And we have seen states that started to establish specialized courts to handle cases of rape or other forms of gender-based violence. So we have seen a positive movement. We have seen an increasing awareness in the society, in the institutions, and this is a good starting point for the future.
All right, Your Excellency, I quite agree with you. But how do we involve the Parliament to eliminate this menace? Because it looks like we need responses from the parliamentarians on this issue.
Well, the Parliament plays a very important role as the representatives of the people, and their role is fundamental, especially on in three aspects. First one is lawmaking. The second one is in overseeing the implementation of these laws, because good laws are those laws that are effectively implemented. And the third, and I would say even maybe most important one, is the budgetary role that the Parliament plays. And the Parliament is fundamental, to ensure that appropriate budget appropriations are made for laws to be effectively implemented and for the response to be effectively and sufficiently funded.
All right. Oftentimes people see violence against women and girls as a family affair, and it is so sad that when these cases are presented at the police station, even the police see them as family affair. It is a very wrong notion. How do we correct this anomaly from the home front?
As I said, I think it's important that we create more awareness about this phenomenon, and that all the different actors within the institutions and within the society are properly involved. At the community level in particular, religious leaders, traditional rulers, we have seen in those places and in those cases where all the community is involved, we have seen that this phenomenon start to be addressed in a different way. Law enforcement agencies, of course, they also play a very important role, and they have to be part of this response. But as I said, what we have seen in Nigeria, especially after the launch in 2018 of the Spotlight Initiative, which is a global initiative in the United Nations and implemented together with partner countries, coming together at the community level, law enforcement agencies, and we see a positive dynamic there, even if in terms of numbers and statistics we are not yet there.
You know, the NTA survived. In honoring the memory of my late friend and colleague Shikeola Eunice Ikpenaye, I threw up a conversation on how best to manage health in a hectic work environment. My resource person for that conversation was Dr. Kashmir Ifeanyi, a public health expert. I mean, we're discussing this whole issue of hectic job schedule, you know, and I'm sure you're used to telling your patient and some folks out there with heavy work or heavy work schedule to take a break, and that life's too short. In the midst of all that is happening around us in terms of prevalence of cardiovascular diseases, stress, fatigue, and mental health issues and disorder, how critical is it to create that work-life balance that puts health and well-being at the top of the shelf, even somewhere, someplace above work?
Thank you. I would want to put out a work definition for this conversation, and I will reference two authorities. Of course, the first one is the World Health Organization that aptly defined health not as the absence of disease, but rather the state of physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being of an individual. That's WHO's working definition for this conversation. Now I refer to another authority, the Britannica, that defined health as the extent an individual can, one, physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially cope with his or her environment. Now, if you situate this, the later definition will be more apt for our conversation today, because it speaks about the extent to which an individual will, in these various spheres, physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially cope with his environment. And so what is the environment in this conversation? The workplace is the environment. The place where you work is the environment. I will create an allegory or an analogy to help take this message. If you get a pond today and you take a golden fish, very, very healthy golden fish, and you put that fish in a pond, as it continues to take in oxygen and produce carbon dioxide, over time, the water will become toxic. That water is the environment of the fish. So the fish is a living being comparable to an individual who works in a place. Now, he comes into the place fresh. You leave school, you are engaged, and then you work in a place. As you continue to work there, sometimes and most times, the place has its own ambience. It has its own peculiarities, and they start taking a toll. Just the way the fish was putting out carbon monoxide, altering the pH of the pool, and over time could become sick. And so if you meet those who rear fish, the first thing they do when fishes become sick is that they change water. And so that speaks volume about the impact of work environment, of your environment on your health. Now, you have talked about hectic work and all those. There are things we need to clarify in our public service, in our work rule in this country. If you go to some developed climes like the United Kingdom, you find out that in a week, you cannot work more than 30 hours cumulatively. In Nigeria, if you are
and that is as a rule.
Oh yes, in fact, if you violate it, you are punished. Yes, you are punished. So in Nigeria, those of us in public service, core government work as is known, you find out that if you are religious with your duties, you will be putting minimum of 40 hours in a week, 8 to 4 times 5. So already we have 10 hours in excess of work when compared with the United Kingdom. In fact, in the United Kingdom, it's around 27 hours. So that is the situation. That is one. Now, there are things we do in the past, or that were done in the past, that are fast disappearing from the work ecosystem in Nigeria. You walk into a workplace like a known public corporate company, you will find a functional canteen. It's no more in most places. You walk into a place, it's only the military that is still retaining stuffs like that, where they still have their mess, they have their canteen. You know, before in the military, I don't know whether it is still the practice, if you are posted on a beat, they will bring your ration. The essence of that is to ensure that while delivering on your duty, you eat healthy. That's not commonplace anymore. There were professions or specialties in the past, particularly in the medical parlance in Nigeria, that is gradually going into extinction. That is what was known then as occupational health and safety. In developed world, it is still top-notch. It is their duty to provide direction, advisory, and guide government policy on how to manage workers in the place of work with regard to being fit and proper. One of the things I will say again is that we have come to a point where we have blurred the delineation between between fitness and health, being healthy or health. They do not mean the same thing. They are not synonyms. Fitness simply means an individual ability to cope with athletic activity. That is fitness. So you can do that, but you are not healthy and you do not have health. If you align that to the earlier definition I put out for this discussion. So, what are the issues? The other day, I learned that the military had their normal promotion exercise, and in the course of their physical activity, which is a prelude to the real promotion exercise, a senior military officer, while doing press-up, slumped. That is fitness, which probably he's used to, but because there's an underlying disease, he's not in good health, he passed away. So fitness and health, even though fitness promotes health and is ancillary to health, it is not a replacement.
And that's it for this episode. Remember, this is just the first part of our 2023 review, and so next week we will be looking at key political issues in 2023. I'm Nnamdi Adipo. Join us same time next week for more on Insight.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. See you next week, and a wonderful 2024 to you all. Happy New Year, folks. We'll see you next week.